David Chen had always loved quiet places. After his divorce 2 years ago, he decided city life wasn't for him anymore. He packed his cameras, his camping gear, and moved to a small cabin in the mountains. His job as a wildlife photographer was perfect for someone who wanted to be alone with nature. No drama, no arguments, just birds, trees, and beautiful landscapes. The cabin sat on the edge of a forest that locals said was magical. David didn't believe in magic, but he did believe the area was special. The trees were older than anything he'd seen before, and the wildlife was incredible. He'd already captured photos of species that weren't supposed to be in this region. His editor back in the city was thrilled. One morning in early June, David woke up at 4:30. He wanted to catch the sunrise at a spot he'd heard about from the cabin's previous owner. There was supposed to be a hidden lake somewhere deep in the forest, surrounded by cliffs, perfect for photographing the golden hour light on water. He grabbed his camera bag, filled his thermos with coffee, and headed out. The trail was barely visible, overgrown, and clearly not used much. Good, he thought. That meant fewer people and better chances of seeing wildlife in their natural state. After hiking for almost an hour, pushing through thick bushes and climbing over fallen logs, David heard it. Water. Not a stream, but the gentle lapping of a lake. His heart beat faster with excitement. He'd found it. He moved carefully, trying not to make noise. Photographers learned to be silent. One snap of a twig could scare away the perfect shot. As he pushed through the last wall of bushes, he stopped completely. The lake was beautiful beyond anything he'd imagined. The water was crystal clear, almost glowing in the pre-dawn light. And around the edges grew plants he'd never seen before. They seemed to pulse with a soft blue light. David raised his camera to his eye, adjusting the lens to capture the strange plants. That's when he saw her through the viewfinder. A woman was in the water, near the far side of the lake. His first thought was annoyance. He'd hiked all this way for a private shot, and someone else had found the spot first. But then he looked closer. Something was wrong. No, not wrong exactly. Different. The woman's skin seemed to shimmer, catching light in a way human skin didn't. Her hair floated around her in the water, but it moved like it had its own life, darker than black, with hints of deep purple. David's hands trembled. He told himself it was just the dawn light playing tricks. Maybe she was wearing some kind of special swimsuit. But then she moved, rising slightly from the water, and he saw her clearly. Her skin had patterns on it, delicate lines that glowed faintly, like circuit boards made of light. His finger pressed the shutter button out of pure instinct. Click, click, click. The camera captured frame after frame. Then she turned. Her eyes met his across the entire length of the lake. There was no way she should have been able to see him from that distance, hidden in the bushes. But she did. Her eyes were larger than normal, with colors that shifted from gold to green to something he had no name for. David felt a jolt go through his entire body, like he'd touched an electric fence. The air around him seemed to vibrate. His vision blurred, and the camera slipped from his hands. He tried to catch it, but his arms wouldn't work right. Everything went bright, white, then dark. When David opened his eyes, he was lying on his own couch. Sunlight streamed through the cabin windows. His head pounded like he'd been hit by a truck. He sat up slowly, confused. How did he get home? The last thing he remembered was the lake, and the woman, and those impossible eyes. His camera bag sat on the floor beside the couch, perfectly arranged. Too perfectly. David never left his gear like that. He grabbed the camera and turned it on, scrolling through the photos. Pictures of the forest trail, the sunrise beginning, the strange glowing plants, and then nothing. Just corrupted files, screens of gray static. All except one. The last photo showed a blurry figure in water, but you couldn't make out any details. A sound made him jump. He turned and froze completely. 3 people stood in his living room. He hadn't heard them come in. He hadn't heard anything. They wore long, dark robes with hoods that shadowed their faces. The cabin door behind them was still closed and locked. David's mouth went dry. His heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to run, but where would he go? They were between him and the door. The figure in the middle stepped forward and lowered their hood. It was an older man, or something that looked like an older man. His skin had the same faint shimmer David had seen on the woman in the lake. His eyes were kind but serious. "David Chen," the man said. His voice sounded normal, but there was something else underneath it, like harmonics in music. "Please don't be afraid. We mean you no harm, but we must speak with you about what happened this morning." David's voice came out as a croak. "Who are you? What are you?" "My name is Elder Tam. We are the Zarathi. We have lived on this planet alongside humanity for a very long time, hidden in places like this forest. And this morning, you accidentally witnessed something you were never meant to see." The other two figures lowered their hoods. One was a woman with silver hair and copper-toned skin with those same glowing patterns. The other was younger, maybe David's age, with features that looked almost human except for the eyes. "The woman you saw," Elder Tam continued, "her name is Lyra. She was performing a sacred cleansing ritual in our protected waters. Those waters are holy to our people. No outsider has seen them in 800 years. David finally found his voice. "I didn't mean to. I was just taking photos of birds. I didn't know anyone was there. We understand it was an accident," the silver-haired woman said gently. "But accident or not, our sacred law is clear. You have witnessed a Zarathi woman in the sacred waters. There are only two paths forward now." The younger one spoke up, his voice tight with something that might have been anger or might have been fear. "You can agree to marry Lyra and become part of our community, bound by our laws to keep our existence secret. Or we erase your memory of this morning, of the lake, of everything connected to us. You'll lose the past 3 months of your life to make sure the memory removal is complete." David laughed. He couldn't help it. It was too crazy. "This is a joke, right? Someone set this up. Is there a camera somewhere?" But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. The way they'd appeared in his locked cabin, the strange beauty of the woman in the lake, his missing memory of getting home, none of it was normal. Elder Tam's expression remained serious. "This is no joke. Our law has protected both our people and yours for thousands of years. When a secret is exposed, it must be contained. Marriage is the traditional way. It creates a bond that ensures loyalty and silence. Memory erasure is the modern alternative, but it's not without risks. You have 24 hours to decide," the silver-haired woman said. "We know this is difficult. We know it seems impossible. But these are your only choices." David's mind raced. 3 months of his life. He'd documented 2 rare bird species in that time, tracked migration patterns, built relationships with his editor. His whole career could be affected. But marriage? To a complete stranger? An alien stranger? "Can I at least meet her?" David asked. "Before I decide?" The 3 Zarathi exchanged looks. Elder Tam nodded slowly. "That can be arranged. It's unusual, but these are unusual circumstances." He pulled out a small device that looked like a smooth river stone. He touched it, and suddenly Lyra's face appeared in the air above it, like a hologram. She looked terrified. Her eyes were wide, and she was clearly arguing with someone off-screen. The image had no sound, but David could see her distress. Whatever this law was, she didn't want it either. They were both trapped by an ancient rule neither of them had chosen. Looking at her fear somehow made his own fear less. She was a person, or something like a person, and she was just as unhappy about this situation as he was. "I need time to think," David said quietly. "You have until dawn tomorrow," Elder Tam replied. We'll return then for your answer. Choose wisely, David Chen. Both paths have consequences. They pulled their hoods back up and simply vanished. No door opening, no footsteps. David sat alone in his cabin, staring at his blurry photograph, wondering if his quiet life in the mountains had just ended forever. David didn't sleep that night. He sat at his small kitchen table, drinking cup after cup of coffee, trying to process everything. His logical brain said it was impossible. Aliens? Sacred laws? Arranged marriages? But his camera still held that blurry photo, and he'd seen those three people appear and disappear from his locked cabin with his own eyes. By the time dawn painted the sky pink, he'd made his decision. He couldn't lose 3 months of work. More than that, something about Lyra's frightened face in that hologram stuck with him. She was trapped too. Maybe, together, they could figure something out. When Elder Tam and the others appeared in his living room again, exactly as the sun broke over the mountains, David was ready. "I'll do it," he said. "I'll marry her. But I want to meet her, first. Talk to her. If we're going to be stuck in this together, we should at least know each other." Elder Tam smiled for the first time. A wise choice, and a reasonable request. "Come with us." They told him to close his eyes. David felt a strange pulling sensation, like falling upward. When he opened his eyes again, he wasn't in his cabin anymore. He stood in a massive underground cavern lit by the same glowing plants he'd seen at the lake. Buildings that looked ancient, but somehow advanced at the same time, rose from the cavern floor. People. Zarathi people. "Welcome to our settlement," the silver-haired woman said. "We've lived beneath these mountains for 3,000 years. Before that, we had 12 other homes across your planet, always hidden, always watching." David's legs felt weak. He was really here. This was really happening. They led him through winding streets, where Zarathi stopped their conversations to watch him pass. He heard whispers in a language that sounded like water flowing over rocks. They brought him to a building covered in growing vines that sparkled with tiny lights. Inside, it was like someone had combined an art gallery with a greenhouse. Plants grew everywhere, but in organized patterns that seemed both beautiful and scientific. And there, in the center of the room, standing among the plants with her arms crossed, was Lyra. She was even more striking in person. Her skin had those glowing patterns running down her arms and neck, like tattoos made of light. Her hair fell to her waist, that impossible black-purple color. She wore simple clothing, something like a tunic and pants, made from material that seemed to shimmer. But her face was what caught him. She looked angry and scared and defiant all at once. "So you're the photographer," she said. Her voice was melodic but sharp. "The human who's ruined my life." David felt his own anger rise. "I ruined your life? Lady, I was just doing my job. I didn't ask for any of this either." "I know." She deflated a little, her shoulders dropping. "I'm sorry. This isn't your fault. It's mine. I should have checked the area more carefully before the ritual. I was distracted, thinking about my research, and I didn't sense you there." Elder Tam cleared his throat. "We'll leave you two to talk. The ceremony must happen in 3 days. Use this time to understand each other." He and the others left, closing the door behind them. Awkward silence filled the room. Lyra turned away, touching one of her plants gently. David noticed her hands were trembling. "How old are you?" he asked, trying to start somewhere. 247 of your years," she said without turning around. "I'm considered young among my people. We live much longer than humans." "Right. Of course you do. It's our law." Lyra finally turned to face him. "When the sacred waters are witnessed, a bond must be formed to protect the secret. Marriage has been the way for thousands of years. It ensures loyalty, creates family ties between the witness and our people. But you don't want this. No. Her voice was soft. I've never wanted to marry. I have work to do. Research that matters. I study your planet's plants, how they interact with ours, how we can help them survive what's coming. Marriage was always something for later, or never. David walked closer to her, careful not to startle her. What's coming? She met his eyes. Hers were golden in this light, sad and deep. My people have been trying to slow it down, repair what we can. That's my work. Creating hybrid species that can adapt. Planting forests in secret. Cleaning waters. And now, instead of doing that, I have to be married to a stranger. A human stranger. David added. That probably makes it worse. Right? To his surprise, she almost smiled. A little. No offense. None taken. I'm not thrilled about marrying an alien either. They stared at each other, and then both of them laughed. It was exhausted. Slightly hysterical laughter. But it broke the tension. Look, David said. What if we make a deal? We go through with this marriage thing because we have to. But we don't have to be actually married. You know? We can be partners, roommates, whatever you want to call it. We do what we need to do to satisfy the law, and then we figure out how to live our lives. Lyra studied him carefully. You would agree to that? You'd bind yourself to me, to our law, without expecting anything in return? I don't know what I'm expecting, David admitted. But I know I don't want to force you into something you don't want. We're both stuck. Might as well be stuck together as friends, instead of enemies. She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Friends. I think I can work with that. But you need to understand what you're agreeing to. The bonding ceremony isn't just words. It's a telepathic link. We'll be connected, able to sense each other's emotions, sometimes thoughts, and it lasts for at least 200 years by our law. You'll be bound to me for the rest of your life. David felt his stomach drop. Telepathic? You can read my mind? Not read, exactly. More like feel. Your emotions will echo in my consciousness. And mine in yours. It's how we ensure the bond is real. That secrets stay kept. She looked away. I'm sorry. I know it's invasive. I don't like it either. Well, 200 years, David muttered. I'll be dead in 50 if I'm lucky. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'll feel you die. That's another reason our elders discourage bonding with humans. The grief can be devastating. The weight of what they were facing settled over both of them. This wasn't just an inconvenient arrangement. It was a complete merging of their lives, with consequences that would last far beyond David's lifetime. I have 1,000 questions, David said finally. About you, your people, how you've stayed hidden. All of it. And I have questions about you, Lyra replied. What kind of person hikes alone into forests before dawn? Why photography? What made you choose to live in isolation? David smiled slightly. My ex-wife said I loved nature more than I loved her. She was probably right. My mother said I loved plants more than I loved people, Lyra said. She was definitely right. They shared another look, something like understanding passing between them. Over the next 3 days, they talked. David learned that the Zerathi came from a planet that died from environmental collapse, that they'd traveled for generations to reach Earth, that they'd been here so long they considered it home now. Lyra told him about their technology, their culture, their laws both beautiful and strict. Lyra learned about photography, about David's childhood growing up in a city, about his failed marriage, and his decision to start over in the mountains. She seemed fascinated by human emotions, how quick and strong they were compared to Zerathi feelings. On the 3rd day, as they prepared for the ceremony, David realized something. He didn't dread it anymore. Lyra was strange and otherworldly, but she was also smart and funny in her own way. She cared deeply about things that mattered, And they were both outsiders in their own worlds, people who preferred plants and animals to crowds and noise. The ceremony took place at the sacred lake, where it all began. Zarathi filled the shores, hundreds of them, their skin glowing in patterns that reflected off the water. Elder Tam led the ritual, speaking in that flowing language David couldn't understand. Lyra took his hands. Her skin was warm, slightly textured like smooth bark. They looked into each other's eyes as Elder Tam said the binding words. David felt something shift in his mind, like a door opening that he hadn't known was there. And through that door came Lyra's emotions. Fear, sadness, but also hope. Just a little hope. He tried to send back calmness, acceptance, friendship. Her eyes widened slightly, and he knew she'd felt it. When it was done, when they were declared bonded by Zarathi law, an old woman near the front smiled knowingly. David heard her whisper to her companion, "This is how all our arranged marriages begin. Give them time." Walking back to Lyra's dwelling, their hands still linked by ceremonial ribbons that would dissolve by morning, David wondered if the old woman might be right. Time would tell. They had plenty of it, at least by human standards. "So," Lyra said as they reached her door. "Ready as I'll ever be, wife," David replied. They stepped inside together, two strangers bound by ancient law, beginning a journey neither had wanted but both would have to walk. The door closed behind them, and somewhere in the distance, the sacred waters continued their eternal flow, keeping secrets older than memory. Living with Lyra was nothing like David had imagined. Her dwelling was carved into the cavern wall, and stepping inside felt like walking into two different worlds merged into one. Half the space looked like something from a science fiction movie, with panels of light that responded to touch and furniture that adjusted itself automatically. The other half was basically a jungle, with plants growing in careful arrangements everywhere. "I need the plants for my work," Lyra explained on that first day. "But also, they help me feel at home. Some of these are from my original world, seeds that survived the journey. They're all that's left of where I came from." David reached out to touch a flower that seemed to breathe, its petals opening and closing slowly. "That's what I thought about you," Lyra said, then looked embarrassed. "I mean, humans in general. Not you specifically. Though you are also, objectively, not terrible to look at." David laughed. "Thanks, I think?" The first week was awkward. David couldn't sleep normally, because Lyra didn't sleep at all. She would sit up during the night, working on her research, and he could feel her concentration through their bond. It was like having someone humming in the back of his mind constantly. And she struggled with his need to eat 3 times a day, finding the smells strange and sometimes overwhelming. "How do you survive on such heavy food?" she asked, watching him eat a sandwich. "It looks so solid." "How do you survive on just light and water?" he countered. "Don't you get hungry?" "I absorb nutrients through my skin and from the light spectrum my plants generate. Food like yours would make me sick." She paused. "Though I am curious about the taste. We can experience flavors but in a different way, through touch rather than mouth." They fell into a routine slowly. David would wake early, make his coffee, and work on his photography while Lyra continued her night research. Around midday, they'd go together to the upper levels, where David could access sunlight and fresh air. He'd photograph the hidden forest areas, while Lyra collected samples and checked on various plant projects. It was during one of these trips that David began to understand the scope of what the Zarathi were doing. "See that grove?" Lyra pointed to a cluster of trees that looked almost normal. "They grow twice as fast as normal oaks, absorb 3 times the carbon, and their root systems prevent soil erosion. We've planted thousands of them across the continent over the past 50 years. You've been secretly saving the planet," David said, amazed. "Trying to," Lyra corrected, "but it's not enough." The damage humans are causing accelerates faster than we can repair. That's why I wanted to reveal our existence. If we worked together openly, shared our technology, maybe we'd have a chance. Your elders don't agree? They're afraid. The last time we revealed ourselves openly to a human civilization was 12,000 years ago. We helped them build great things, taught them astronomy and agriculture. Then their society collapsed into war, and they blamed us, called us demons and gods, and hunted us. We barely survived. The elders won't risk that again. Action. David thought about this as he photographed a rare bird landing on one of the hybrid trees. Through their bond, he felt Lyra's frustration and sadness. She genuinely loved this planet and wanted to save it, but her own people's fear held her back. What if there was proof? He asked. Proof that humans and Zirathi could work together successfully? What do you mean? Us. David lowered his camera. We're proof, aren't we? A human and Zirathi, living together, working together? What if we documented it? Showed your elders that cooperation is possible? Lyra's emotions flickered through their bond, excitement mixed with doubt. They'd never accept just us. One couple means nothing. It could be an exception. Replay. Then we make it more than just us. We work on your hybrid project together, but we do it my way too. I document everything with photos and data. We create a record that shows both species contributing, achieving things neither could alone. For the first time since the bonding, David felt pure hope radiate from Lyra through their connection. You'd help me? Really help? Not just go along with things? I'm starting to care about this place too, David admitted. Your passion is contagious. Besides, what else am I going to do for the next 50 years? They began collaborating in earnest after that. David's photography skills and his understanding of wildlife patterns complemented Lyra's botanical knowledge and Zirathi technology. They created detailed surveys of hybrid species integration, tracked ecosystem improvements, and documented everything meticulously. During this time, something else started happening. The telepathic bond between them deepened naturally. At first, it had been just vague emotions. But as weeks passed, David could sense Lyra's thoughts more clearly. And she could sense his. Not everything. Not private thoughts. But intentions and feelings became transparent. One night, about a month after the bonding, David woke up gasping from a nightmare. Before he could fully process it, Lyra was there, her cool hand on his shoulder. I felt your fear, she said softly. What happened? Just a dream. About my divorce. The moment I came home and found my wife packing her things. Lyra sat beside him on the sleeping platform he'd set up in the corner of her dwelling. Tell me about it. Sometimes speaking fears makes them smaller. So, David talked. Really talked. About his failed marriage. How his wife had said he was emotionally distant. That he cared more about his work than about her. How she wasn't entirely wrong. How he'd moved to the mountains partly to run away from that failure. I think, David said quietly, I'm afraid of failing at this too. At us. We can't fail at something we didn't choose, Lyra replied. But then she paused. Except, it's starting to feel like a choice, isn't it? We're choosing to be partners, to work together, to care about what happens to each other. Yeah, David agreed. Through their bond, emotions flowed both ways. David felt Lyra's own fear, her worry that she'd outlive him by 200 years and carry the grief forever. But he also felt something else. Something new and fragile. Affection. I didn't want this, Lyra said. I resented you at first. But now, when I wake up and you're not there, the dwelling feels empty. When I discover something interesting, my first thought is to show you. That wasn't supposed to happen. No, David said. It wasn't. They sat in silence, both processing what was growing between them. The bond that was supposed to be just a legal formality was becoming something real. Something real. The next day, they were working in a meadow where Lyra was testing a new grass hybrid when disaster struck. David was photographing a flowering pattern when his phone buzzed, an unusual event since cell service barely reached the mountains. It was his old editor. David, emergency. That development company, Mountain Vista Resorts, they're moving forward with the lake project. They got the permits approved. They start draining it next month. David's heart dropped. What lake? The one you mentioned. The hidden one where you wanted to do that wildlife series. They're turning it into some kind of luxury resort. I thought you'd want to know. He hung up and turned to Lyra, who'd already sensed his distress through their bond. The sacred lake, he said. Humans are going to drain it and build a resort. We have to stop them. Think. Lyra's face went pale, her glowing patterns dimming. That lake is essential to our ecosystem. The plants there purify water for the entire region, and it's holy to us. If humans discover its properties, they'll discover us. Then we stop them, David said firmly. Together. How? We can't reveal ourselves, and humans rarely listen to environmental concerns when money is involved. David thought fast. We make them have to listen. I know a conservation lawyer, someone I worked with on a project years ago. If we can prove there's an endangered species in that lake, they'll have to halt construction for an environmental review. But there isn't an endangered species there, Lyra said. David smiled. Not yet. Can your science create one? Something that looks native to Earth, but is rare enough to trigger protection laws? Lyra's eyes widened. That's brilliant. Unethical by Zarathi standards. Manipulating human systems like that, but brilliant. Yes, I can create something. A fish or amphibian hybrid that will register as undiscovered but clearly endangered. They worked around the clock for 2 weeks. Lyra used Zarathi bioengineering to create a small fish species that looked entirely natural, with unique genetic markers that would fool any human testing. David documented everything, creating a false history of sightings and behavior patterns. The night they planned to introduce the fish to the lake, they had to sneak past human security that the development company had already posted. They moved through the forest like shadows, David carrying sealed containers of their created species. Lyra using her natural abilities to sense approaching humans before they got close. When they reached the lake, David stopped. If we get caught, this could expose you. Your people. Are you sure? This place is worth the risk, Lyra said. And besides, I trust you. If something goes wrong, we'll face it together. Those words, simple but sincere, sent warmth through their bond. David realized with sudden clarity that he trusted her too, completely. They released the fish into the sacred waters, watching them adapt instantly to the environment. Lyra had designed them perfectly. As they turned to leave, security lights suddenly blazed to life. Someone shouted. They'd been spotted. Run! David grabbed Lyra's hand, and they sprinted into the forest. His heart pounded as branches whipped past them. Behind them, footsteps and voices echoed. Lyra pulled him off the main path, her night vision and knowledge of the terrain superior to his. They reached a narrow ravine, and without hesitation, Lyra jumped. David followed, his photographer's instincts making him trust her lead. They landed in a stream 15 feet below, the water breaking their fall. Hidden beneath an overhang, they waited as security searched above them. David could hardly breathe, adrenaline making everything sharp and clear. Lyra pressed close to him, and through their bond, he felt her exhilaration mixed with fear. They'd done something dangerous and possibly foolish together, and they'd survived it. When the security finally gave up and left, they pulled themselves from the water, soaked and exhausted. And then, Despite everything, they started laughing. That was insane, David gasped. That was necessary, Lyra countered. But she was smiling. Her patterns glowed brighter when she was happy. He'd learned. Right now, they were luminous. Walking back to the settlement, hands linked without thinking about it, David realized the truth. The old Zarathi woman at the bonding ceremony had been right. What started as a forced arrangement was becoming something neither of them had expected, something that felt dangerously like love. And in a few weeks, when his lawyer friend confirmed that an exciting new species had been discovered in the lake, halting all development indefinitely, they'd have their first real victory together. But more than that, they'd have proof that a human and Zarathi could accomplish what neither could alone. The question was whether that would be enough to change centuries of Zarathi isolation, and whether what was growing between David and Lyra would survive the challenges ahead. The success with the lake changed everything. Within a month, David's conservation lawyer friend had the development completely stopped. The newly discovered fish species made national news among biologists. Environmental groups praised the finding, and Mountain Vista resorts quietly abandoned their plans. But the real victory happened in the Zarathi settlement. Elder Tam called a council meeting, and for the first time in David's memory through the bond, Lyra felt genuine hope radiating from her community's leadership. "You've proven something important," Elder Tam told them in the council chamber. "A human and Zarathi working together achieved what neither could alone. Perhaps the old woman at your bonding saw more clearly than the rest of us." David stood before the assembled elders, trying not to be nervous. Dozens of Zarathi watched him, their glowing patterns creating a constellation of lights in the dim chamber. "It doesn't have to be just us," he said. "There are humans who would understand, who would help if they knew the truth. Scientists, conservationists, people who care about the planet more than profit." An older female elder spoke up, her voice sharp. "And how many wars has your species fought over differences far smaller than what separates us from you? How many times have humans destroyed what they fear?" "Too many," David admitted. "But also, humans have learned from mistakes. We've created international cooperation, environmental movements, peace treaties. We're not perfect, but we're capable of change." The council argued for hours. David and Lyra stood together through it all, and he could feel her nervousness through their bond. Finally, Elder Tam raised his hand for silence. "We will consider a trial program. 5 more human Zarathi bondings, voluntary ones, between humans carefully selected for their environmental work, and Zarathi willing to take the risk. If these bonds prove successful like yours, we'll consider broader contact. But," he looked sternly at David, "any sign of human aggression or betrayal, and we disappear. We have contingency plans to leave this planet if necessary." Lyra gripped David's hand tightly. Through their bond, he felt her conflicting emotions: excitement about the possibility, terror about her people leaving Earth, hope that it wouldn't come to that. Over the next few months, their lives fell into a comfortable rhythm. David and Lyra continued their conservation work, now with official approval from the Zarathi Council. They expanded their documentation, creating detailed records of successful environmental cooperation. But something else was happening too. Something neither of them talked about openly. The telepathic bond was deepening in ways that went beyond friendship. David would catch himself staring at Lyra as she worked with her plants, fascinated by the graceful way she moved, the intensity of her focus, and he could feel through their connection that she watched him too, with curiosity that had shifted into something warmer. One evening, after a long day documenting a new hybrid forest, they sat together on an outcropping that overlooked a valley. The sunset painted everything in gold and purple. "I need to tell you something," Lyra said quietly. "The bonding. It's becoming permanent." David turned to her. "Permanent? I thought it already was." Legally, yes. But telepathically, there are stages. Right now, we could still separate if we chose to. We'd feel the loss, but we'd survive intact. But if the bond deepens much more, it becomes irreversible. My consciousness and yours would be so intertwined that separating would damage us both. How much more? David asked. It happens when bonded partners truly fall in love, Lyra said, not meeting his eyes. When the emotional connection becomes complete. The elders warned me this would happen if we spent too much time together, if we became too close. They said to maintain distance, to keep our relationship practical. David's heart beat faster. And have we? Become too close? Lyra finally looked at him, her golden green eyes reflecting the sunset. I think we're getting there. I feel things for you that I never expected to feel for anyone. Especially, not a human. When you're away, I miss you. When you're happy, I feel warm inside. When you're in danger, I feel fear that's stronger than anything I've felt for myself. Lyra, David said softly. Everything he'd been trying to keep controlled. The way she made him laugh. The admiration he felt for her passion. The growing attraction that had started as curiosity and become something deeper. She gasped slightly. You feel the same way. I'm starting to, yeah. And it scares me because I know what it means for you. I'll die in a few decades, and you'll live on for 200 more years. The elders said the grief could destroy you. I know, Lyra whispered. I've thought about that every day since the bonding. Loving you means I'll lose you. Watching you age while I stay young, feeling your life force dim through our bond, and then the final silence when you're gone. It could break me. Then maybe we should pull back, David said, even though the words felt like cutting off his own arm. Stay friends, partners, but not more. Protect you from that grief. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she took his hand. Her touch warm and gentle. David, my planet died. My people fled through space for generations. We've lost our home, our history, everything except each other, and the hope that we could build something new here. I learned a long time ago that everything worth having comes with the risk of loss. But this is guaranteed loss, David argued. You know it's coming. Yes. But would you rather live 50 years feeling half alive to avoid pain? Or live 50 years fully, completely, even knowing how it ends? In quote, unquote. She smiled sadly. Besides, it's already too late for me. I've already fallen in love with you. Pulling back now won't change that. David felt tears in his eyes. Through their bond, he felt her certainty, her acceptance of the future pain, and underneath it all, her love. Clear and strong and absolutely terrifying. I love you too, he said. I didn't mean for it to happen, but I do. They kissed for the first time as the sun disappeared below the horizon. And in that moment, their bond flared and deepened, becoming something unbreakable. Two consciousnesses merging into a partnership that would last as long as David's human life would allow. But their happiness didn't last long. 3 days later, everything fell apart. David woke up in the middle of the night to find Lyra standing frozen in the center of their dwelling, her patterns pulsing rapidly in distress. What's wrong? He asked, instantly alert. Someone's broken into our research lab, she said. Someone Zirathi. They're destroying everything. They ran through the settlement tunnels, arriving at the lab to find it in chaos. Equipment was smashed, plants torn from their growing stations, and all their carefully organized data files had been corrupted. Standing in the middle of the destruction was a young Zirathi male David had seen around the settlement but never met. Keth, what have you done? Lyra demanded. What should have been done from the beginning? Keth said coldly. You're putting our entire species at risk with your human-loving experiments. Did you really think the Council would continue allowing this? The Council approved our work, David said. A minority of the Council, Keth corrected. Many of us see the truth. This planet is dying, and no amount of cooperation with humans will save it. They're the disease, not the cure. We should leave Earth while we still can. Find a new home. Let humanity face the consequences of their own destruction. Lyra stepped forward, her patterns flaring with anger. We chose this planet. We've lived here for thousands of years. We have a responsibility to try to save it. We have a responsibility to survive. Keth shot back. And your precious human here is proof of why bonding with them is dangerous. You're already compromised, thinking like them, feeling like them. In a few decades, he'll be dead, and you'll be a broken shell. Is that survival? Before anyone could react, Keth pulled out a device and threw it against the wall. It shattered, releasing a pulse of energy that made David's head feel like it was splitting open. He collapsed, crying out. Through the bond, Lyra felt his pain as her own. She screamed and lunged at Keth, her normally peaceful nature giving way to protective fury. They fought, and David tried to help, but his human body was no match for Zarathi's strength and speed. Security arrived quickly, pulling Keth away. But the damage was done. Months of research destroyed, and worse, David had been injured by the energy pulse. As Zarathi healers examined him, they delivered devastating news. The pulse damaged his neural pathways, the healer explained to Lyra. The same pathways that allow your telepathic bond. We can heal the physical damage, but the bond itself is compromised. It's causing him pain. What does that mean? Lyra asked, her voice shaking. It means, the healer said gently, you may have to choose between keeping the bond and keeping him healthy. We can sever the connection, remove the damaged pathways. He'll survive. He'll recover. But you'll no longer be bonded. David, lying on the medical platform, felt Lyra's devastation through their damaged connection. It came in waves of pain and grief that made his own injuries seem small in comparison. No, he said firmly. We'll find another way. There is no other way, the healer said. The damage is progressive. Every day you stay bonded, the pain will increase for both of you. Eventually, it could kill you both. Lyra sat beside him, taking his hand. Tears ran down her face. Something Zarathi rarely did. Through their fractured bond, David felt everything she felt. Love, loss, grief, and anger at the unfairness of it all. They just admitted their feelings, just allowed themselves to be happy, and now they might lose everything. We survived your sacred law, David said, squeezing her hand. We survived security, chasing us through the forest. We'll survive this too. But even as he said it, doubt crept through their damaged connection. Keth's attack had done more than destroy their research. It had exposed the deep division in Zarathi society and put their very existence in question. That night, as David lay recovering and Lyra refused to leave his side, Elder Tam brought more bad news. Keth hadn't acted alone. A significant faction of Zarathi wanted to leave Earth entirely. They'd been secretly building ships, preparing for evacuation. They saw David and Lyra's project as a waste of time, a dangerous fantasy that put everyone at risk. They're planning something bigger, Elder Tam said quietly. An attack that will force our hand, make us leave. We don't know what or when, but Keth was just the beginning. David looked at Lyra through the dim light of the medical chamber. Her patterns pulsed weakly with exhaustion and grief. They'd fought so hard to prove that cooperation was possible, that love could bridge the gap between species. And now extremists on her own side were trying to tear it all down. How much time do we have? David asked the healer. Before the bond damage becomes irreversible? Days. Maybe a week. After that, separation will be your only option. 1 week to stop a faction of aliens from abandoning Earth, to heal a bond that was killing them both, and to prove that what they'd built together was worth saving. David had faced a lot of challenges since that morning at the lake, But this felt impossible. Through their damaged connection, he felt Lyra's thoughts clearly. Nothing worth having comes without risk. We'll find a way. He just hoped they'd have enough time to do it. The next 3 days were the hardest of David's life. The pain from the damaged bond grew worse each day, like someone driving needles through his skull. But worse than the physical pain was feeling Lyra's suffering through their connection. Every spike of his pain echoed in her, and her grief and guilt over his injury came back to him. They were locked in a cycle of shared agony. The healers wanted to sever the bond immediately, but both David and Lyra refused. Not yet. Not until they'd tried everything else. Elder Tam brought them information about the separatist faction. They called themselves the Departed, and their plan was more extreme than anyone had realized. They weren't just building ships to leave. They planned to erase all evidence of Zerathi presence on Earth. That meant destroying the hybrid species, collapsing the underground settlements, and erasing decades of environmental repair work. They believe humanity is beyond saving, Elder Tam explained, his ancient face lined with worry. And they see your bond, your project, as false hope that keeps the rest of us trapped on a dying world. When? Lyra asked through gritted teeth, fighting through the bond pain. We don't know. Soon. They've grown bold after Keth's attack went relatively unpunished. David forced himself to sit up despite the pain. Then we need to do something bold too. Something that proves cooperation works, that gives your people a reason to stay. Like what? Lyra asked. Our research is destroyed. We have no evidence of our success. We have us, David said. We're the evidence. Think about it. The Departed are right about one thing. The planet is dying fast. Your people alone can't fix it in time. Humans alone definitely can't. But together, we might have a chance. The Council will never approve open contact with humanity, Elder Tam said. The risk is too great. What if we didn't ask permission? David looked at Lyra. What if we went public? I call in every contact I have in the environmental community. Scientists, activists, journalists. We show them proof of Zerathi existence, and proof that we've been working together successfully. That's insane, Elder Tam said. You'd be forcing our hand, taking away our choice to remain hidden. The Departed are already taking away that choice, Lyra said slowly, understanding David's plan. If they erase everything and leave, humanity loses the help it desperately needs. But if we reveal ourselves on our terms, show humans that we're allies, not threats, maybe both our species have a future. It could backfire catastrophically, Elder Tam warned. Human history is full of violence against the unknown. And also full of cooperation and wonder, David countered. I know my species. But many more will react with hope, with excitement, with a desperate desire to fix what we've broken. You just have to give us the chance. Through their damaged bond, David felt Lyra's resolve forming. She stood, despite the pain that made her patterns flicker and dim. I'll do it. I'll stand with David, and face whatever comes. My people can choose to support us or leave. But I won't let the Departed make that decision. For everyone. Elder Tam studied them both for a long moment. Then he sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 1,000+ years. You two are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Possibly both. But perhaps that's what this moment needs. He touched his communication device. I'll call an emergency council session. You'll have to convince them, and it won't be easy. The council meeting was intense. David stood before the assembled Zerathi leadership, feeling their skepticism and fear like a weight on his shoulders. His head throbbed from the bond damage, and beside him, Lyra swayed slightly but stood firm. We're asking you to trust humanity, David said. I know that's hard. Your history gives you every reason to be cautious. But I'm asking you to look at what Lyra and I have accomplished. Look at the hybrid species thriving in forests across the continent. Look at the sacred lake, saved from destruction. Look at us. He took Lyra's hand, and despite the pain, their bond flared with shared determination. We're proof that bridges can be built between species that seem too different to connect. Yes, I'll die decades before Lyra. And yes, she'll grieve. But these years we've had, this partnership, it's been worth it. For both of us. We've achieved things neither of us could have alone. An elder spoke up. And what of the humans who will fear us? Who will see us as threats, or try to exploit our technology? They exist, David admitted. But so do humans who will see you as the answer to our prayers. Scientists who've been desperately searching for solutions to climate collapse. Activists who've dedicated their lives to saving the planet. Regular people who look at the stars and hope we're not alone. Lyra stepped forward. I've studied humanity for decades. They're destructive, yes, but also capable of incredible compassion. They create art and music and stories. They sacrifice for their children's future. They're worth saving, and more importantly, they're capable of being partners in saving themselves. The debate raged for hours. Some elders argued for immediate evacuation, others suggested waiting and watching, but a small group, led by Elder Tam, began to see the possibility in David and Lyra's plan. Finally, as David felt consciousness starting to slip from the pain, Elder Tam called for a vote. All who support allowing David and Lyra to make limited contact with trusted humans. Raise your light. Patterns glowed throughout the chamber. David couldn't tell if it was enough, until Elder Tam smiled slightly. The measure passes. By a narrow margin. You have our permission to proceed. But understand this. At the first sign of human aggression or betrayal, we disappear. And you, Lyra, will be considered an exile if you choose to stay behind. I understand, Lyra said firmly. They had 3 days until the Departed's planned attack on the settlements. 3 days to make contact with humans, present evidence, and build enough support to show the Zarathi Council that cooperation was possible, and they had to do it all while their bond continued to deteriorate. David called every contact he'd ever made in environmental work. He reached out to his lawyer friend, to conservation scientists he'd photographed, to activists he'd met over the years. He told them all the same thing. I have evidence of technology that could help save the planet. Meet me at these coordinates tomorrow at dawn. Come alone, and prepare to have your worldview changed. 17 people showed up at the clearing David had specified. They stood in the early morning light, confused and curious. David recognized most of them. Professor Lin, the climate scientist, Tim and Rachel from the Wildlife Foundation, his lawyer friend Veronica, and others he'd worked with over the years. Thank you for coming, David said. His head pounded, and he leaned on a tree for support. What I'm about to show you will seem impossible. I need you to promise me you'll listen to everything before reacting. Can you do that? They agreed, though he saw skepticism on several faces. David took a deep breath and signaled to the forest. Lyra stepped out from the trees. The gasps were immediate. Even in simple clothing, Lyra was obviously not human. Her skin with its glowing patterns, her 2 large eyes, her graceful movement that seemed to defy normal physics, all of it screamed other. This is Lyra, David said. She's Zarathi, and her people have been living hidden on Earth for thousands of years. They've been secretly repairing environmental damage, creating hybrid species to combat extinction, and trying to slow climate collapse. And they're running out of time to make a difference. We all are. For a moment, no one moved. Then Professor Lin stepped forward, her scientific mind overcoming her shock. This is real? I'm actually an alien, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the pain David knew she was feeling. And I'm asking for your help. My people are divided. Many want to leave Earth, to let humanity face the consequences of its own actions. But some of us believe we can still make a difference if we work together. Over the next hour, they showed the group everything. Lyra demonstrated Zerathi technology. David presented years of photographic evidence of hybrid species and environmental improvements. They explained the crisis, both planetary and political. The response was mixed. Some people were terrified, backing away. But most leaned in with questions, with excitement, with desperate hope. Professor Lin cried openly when Lyra showed her projections of what could be achieved with combined human and Zerathi efforts. "This changes everything," Veronica said. "But David, the government, the military, when this gets out, it's already getting out," David said. He held up his phone. "I've been recording this entire conversation and streaming it to a private server. With your permission, I'm going to release it publicly in 24 hours. The world needs to know." "You'll start a panic," someone objected. "Maybe," David admitted. "Or maybe we'll start a movement. People need hope right now. They need to know there's still a chance." Through his bond with Lyra, David felt her pride in him, her love, and underneath it all, her fear. They didn't have much time left before the bond would have to be severed. That evening, as they prepared for the video release, the departed made their move. Explosions rocked the underground settlement. David and Lyra were in the surface forest when it happened, and they felt the ground shake beneath them. "They've started the evacuation," Lyra said, her face pale. "They're destroying the settlements." "Lyra, Lyra, Lyra." They ran toward the entrance. But Keth and several other departed members blocked their path. "It's over. In port," Keth said. "We're leaving, and we're making sure nothing remains behind to expose us. That includes your little human partnership." "You don't speak for all Zerathi," Lyra shot back. "The council approved our mission." "A council of cowards," Keth sneered. "But it doesn't matter now. In an hour, every settlement will be collapsed, every hybrid species eliminated. We're erasing ourselves from this planet." David stepped forward, his phone in hand. "Too late. We've already made contact. 17 trusted humans know about you, and in 12 hours, the whole world will know. You can't hide anymore." Keth's expression turned murderous. He raised a weapon, something that crackled with energy. "Then, we'll start with eliminating the evidence standing in front of me." But before he could fire, Elder Tam and a dozen other Zerathi appeared from the trees. "Stand down, Keth. The council has spoken. There will be no more destruction." Quote, "The council is wrong," Keth shouted. "Perhaps," Elder Tam said calmly. "But we've made our choice. Some of you may leave if you wish. The ships are ready. But those of us who call Earth home will stay and face whatever comes with our new human allies." The standoff lasted several tense minutes. Finally, Keth lowered his weapon. "You're all fools. This planet is dying, and these humans will turn on you the moment they stop fearing you." "Maybe," David said. "Or maybe you're wrong. Maybe there are enough people who want to save this world that we can actually do it. Together." Keth and about 30 other Zerathi left that night, taking one of the ships and disappearing into the stars. The rest stayed, choosing to trust in the possibility of cooperation over the certainty of evacuation. The video went live the next morning. David and Lyra's story spread across the internet like wildfire. The reactions were exactly as mixed as expected. Fear, denial, conspiracy theories. But also wonder, hope, and an overwhelming desire from the scientific and environmental communities to learn more. Within a week, the UN called for an emergency session. Within 2 weeks, a framework for human Zerathi cooperation was being drafted. It wasn't perfect, and there were protests and problems, but it was a start. But for David and Lyra, time had run out. The bond damage had progressed too far. On the same day that the first official human-Zerathi environmental partnership was announced, they sat in the medical chamber, facing the inevitable. "I can't watch you in pain anymore," Lyra said, tears streaming down her face. "We have to let them sever the bond." "I know," David whispered. Through their fractured connection, he felt everything she felt. Love, grief, pride in what they'd accomplished, and devastating sorrow at what they were about to lose. The healer prepared the procedure. "They aren't," David said. "Do it." The severance was agony. David felt Lyra being ripped away from his consciousness. The warmth and constant presence that had been there for months, suddenly gone. He screamed, and heard Lyra screaming too. And then it was over. They sat in the medical chamber, no longer bonded, no longer able to feel each other's emotions. The silence in David's head was deafening. "I can't feel you anymore," Lyra sobbed. "You're right there, but you're gone." "I'm still here," David said, taking her hand. Without the bond, it was just touch, no deeper connection. "I'm still here, and I still love you." "How?" Lyra asked. "How do we do this without the bond? The way humans always have." David said, "We talk. We trust. We choose each other every day, not because we're forced to by law or telepathy, but because we want to." It was harder without the bond. So much harder. They had to learn each other all over again, reading expressions and words instead of emotions and thoughts. They had arguments, misunderstandings, moments of frustration, but they also had triumphs. 6 months after the revelation, the first human Zarathi research facility opened, with David and Lyra as co-directors. A year later, hybrid forests were being planted openly across 5 continents. 2 years later, climate projections showed the first signs of real improvement. And through it all, David and Lyra chose each other. Every morning, every challenge, every victory. They built a partnership not on telepathic bonds or sacred laws, but on mutual respect, shared purpose, and love that grew stronger precisely because it was chosen. 5 years after their bonding ceremony, they stood at the sacred lake where it all began. The development was long abandoned, and the area was now a protected zone, a symbol of human Zarathi cooperation. "Do you regret it?" David asked. "All of this? The pain we went through? Losing the bond?" Lyra took his hand, just normal touch. But it was enough. Never. We helped save 2 species. We proved that bridges can be built across any divide. And I got to fall in love with you twice, once through the bond and once without it. "Only 50 more years of putting up with me," David said with a slight smile. 50 years of living fully," Lyra corrected. "And then 200 years of remembering every moment. No regrets, David. Not a single one." Above them, a Zarathi ship descended, bringing new visitors from the colony worlds who'd heard about Earth's success story. The first human Zarathi child, now 3 years old, played on the shore with her parents, fully accepted by both communities. David photographed it all, documenting the future they'd fought so hard to create. A future where different species worked together, not because they had to, but because they chose to. A future built on hope, cooperation, and the simple truth that love could bridge any distance, even the space between worlds. The sacred waters continued their eternal flow. But now they witnessed not just Zarathi rituals, but picnics and research expeditions and children from 2 species playing together. The lake had kept its secrets for thousands of years. But now, it held something better. Hope for the future. And somewhere in the cosmos, even Keth and the departed heard the news of Earth's success. Some ignored it, committed to their choice to leave. But a few watched from afar, wondering if they'd made the right decision after all. Back on Earth, David and Lyra walked hand in hand into their future. No telepathic bond needed, just 2 people who'd accidentally found each other and chosen to build something beautiful from the chaos. They'd proven that even the most impossible love story could have a happy ending, as long as both people were willing to fight for it. And in the years to come, their story would inspire 4 more human-Zarathi partnerships, then 10, then hundreds. The bridge they'd built became a highway between species, between worlds, between hope and reality. All because one photographer stumbled upon a secret lake and chose love over erasure, partnership over separation, and possibility over fear. The end was just the beginning.